We always paint a fucked up reality that's not even true. It's reality what we think is true because our lives aren't what we want it to be. Well, it comes from a real place. You know, the kind of passion that I bring to my life is something that you can't just make up. It has to come from the sewer. And that's how I look at my life. I came from the sewer. You know, I didn't have these great parents. You know, I didn't have this great education. I didn't have a real loving family. You know, I can't remember how many I can probably count on one hand how many times we say, I love you in my household. So my dad was a very abusive man. He would wake up and start drinking. You know, he loved scotch. He'd wake up in the morning time, start drinking scotch. When he'd get drunk, he'd get violent. And so from the time I was born to the time I was 8 years old, I experienced some serious beatdowns from, you know, and you never know when, like, it wasn't like he had to do something really bad. It wasn't like that. Just being alive made him upset. So that's how I lived for about 8 years, just getting beat like that from my father. And then when that ended, I was 8 years old, we moved to a small town called Brazil, Indiana, and that started another nightmare. And what's funny about that is that we lived in Buffalo, New York, where all this started at. We lived in a place called, it was 201 Paradise Road. 201 Paradise Road was the name of our street because it was nothing, it was, you know, I mean, it was the first thing from paradise. It was absolute hell. You know, imagine waking up in the morning time as a kid and all you know is, am I gonna get beat today? And the whippings weren't like, I'm gonna give you like 3 whippings, you know, just like 3 across your butt, whatever. They were like serious beatdowns to the point where my mom had to write letters to school, you know, excusing me from class because I was so bruised up. So that was the beginning of my life. So with that kind of foundation, to take that broken foundation, because you want to build a house on a good foundation. When you have a seriously broken foundation and you go to a small town in Brazil, Indiana, where there's a lot of racism there. You know, and in my book, I have a lot of pictures. Like people, oh my God, you know, you didn't come up like that. Even people from that town didn't believe that Brazil was that bad. No one wants to really, you know, see, because no one's you. No one's you. No one hears what you hear. No one sees what you see. No one's living the way you're living. And they assume what they want to assume because their life's a certain way. And so now I'm in Brazil, coming from Buffalo, and that started a whole nother hell for me. And I started realizing I had a learning disability. A lot of it was from toxic stress. So I don't believe I so much had a disability in learning. I believe that when my foundation was so broken as a young kid, all that toxic stress caused a whole bunch of issues. So stuttering, patches of hair falling out, white spots on I still have these white spots on my skin. I was born in 1975. We left in 1983, so I was about 8 years old in Buffalo, and that was nothing but beatdowns there. But worse than the beatdowns, there was a lot of mental torture from my dad. My dad was a great psychiatrist. He was almost a shrink.
Right.
Even though he wasn't, he was good at getting in your head, because weak people are really good at getting in your head, because they don't want to ever see you get, like he was really bad on my mom. They never want to see you get above them. A weak person wants to always keep you,
hold you down.
Yes, beneath them.
Right.
And I started realizing that. So as a young kid, I was taking notes, even though I wasn't the smartest kid because my brain didn't want to learn. It was caught in this hell. So, but I was taking notes on everything. What makes this man this way? What makes this man this way? So that was up until I was 8. And then when I was 8, we moved to Brazil, Indiana. And then from 8 until I graduated, it was just a lot of hell. It was one thing after another. God always put another obstacle in front of me. So whenever I thought I was getting over one obstacle, the next one would come up. So Brazil, Indiana was about 10 minutes from a small town called Center Point, Indiana. But Center Point was where a lot of it came from. So those kids and those parents in Center Point, those kids went to my school and they grew up in hate. So all they knew was hate. So they put that hate on me. So my instinct wasn't like to get help. Tell your mom this is how your life is. She never saw one report card of mine. She didn't know that I was going to flunk out of school. She didn't know how bad things were. I never told, my mom that, I'm getting called a nigger all the time. First of all, it's not cool to be bullied.
Right.
So I had 2 different David Gogginses. I had the David Goggins that was afraid, that was very timid and afraid. And I had the David Goggins that walked around like he was cool, that nothing hurt him. That was the fake guy. Well, I have to be real clear on this. What's funny about that is that I was a pretty popular kid in that school. That's the thing. When you look back on it, all you see is the racism. You don't see the popularity of the kids that liked you. The power in being able to calm your mind down and think. That's one thing I learned in my life, is that when I was in hell, I wasn't able to be in hell and be calm. Hell makes you anxious. Hell makes you want to get out of it. It's that person who has the ability to be in hell and think very calmly, very rationally about what the hell is going on. What's the truth? What's the reality? Why is my dad this way? Why are these kids calling me nigger? Why? You have to be able to piece people apart. Take it down, dissect it, and see what's going on. So back then, I didn't have those skills. I had no skills. All I saw was a whole bunch of kids liked me, but I no longer saw that. All I saw was the spray painting on my car, me being called nigger. That's all I saw. My lens was this big. It was very small fucking lens. Where now my lens is huge. I see everybody for who they are and what they are. So that's the one thing that changed in me, was my reality. We always paint a fucked up reality. That's not even true. It's reality what we think is true because our lives aren't what we want it to be. From the time I was born and to the time I was 19 years old, my life had these hurdles. I constantly hit obstacles. Obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. And I had to figure out how to manage suffering, how to deal with it, because it'd be part of my life forever. At least that's what I thought. So in order to deal with it, I had to be able to conquer it and overcome it and deal with it and know that in this suffering there has to be some kind of growth. With every obstacle, I look at it as friction now. Without friction, there is no growth. You have to have friction in your life to grow. So I started looking at all these different things versus the woe is me mentality. Like, oh my God, look at my life. My life's so fucked up. I come from this fucked up family. I'm being beaten. I'm being abused mentally, physically. I started looking at it as the perfect trial ground. So I had to flip it upside down and say, okay, I'm suffering tremendously, mentally. Use this to your advantage versus your disadvantage. So that's what I did. Versus looking at it as like, oh my God, woe is me, I'm never gonna get out of here. I looked at it as, okay, hang on a second. If I can overcome this, if I can find some power in this, some way to get through this, that right there will be the fuel for the rest of my life. And so I found great strength in suffering. Great strength in it because why? Through all of that, it started to callous my mind over the victim's mentality.